2018 regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Workman and Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the planning commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, PDAs, or any other devices that might disrupt this meeting, please either be placed in silent mode or be turned off. Roll call, Mr. Sabran.
Mr. Apahedian.
Here.
Ms. Cruz.
Here.
Mr. Evans.
Here.
Mr. Faison.
Here.
Mr. Hudson. Mr. Krent.
Here.
Ms. Koopa.
Here.
Mr. Senzika.
Here.
Mr. Tagle.
Here.
Ms. Howe.
Here.
Quorum present. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Motion by Mr. Faison and seconded by Ms. Koopa. Roll call, please, Mr. Sabran.
1 second. I better get used to this. Kathy's retiring June 15th.
Oh, wow. That's how you delivered that message?
So I like that. Ms. Cruz.
We don't like that.
Yes.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Ms. Koopa.
Yes.
Mr. Senzika.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Apahedian.
Yes. Item number 3, approval of the minutes for the April 24, 2018 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve as published.
Mr. Edmonds, and a second by Mr. Faison. Roll call, please, Mr. Sabran.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Ms. Koopa.
Yes.
Mr. Senzika. Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Apahedian.
Yes.
Ms. Cruz.
Yes. Can I do that if I wasn't there? I can still do that, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Item number 4 on the agenda, public comment for items not on the agenda. Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we move to item number 5, preliminary site plan review, file number SPJPLN 2017-009, proposed elevation revisions for Midtown Place, south of East Maple, east side Livernois 1300-1310 Livernois, section 34, currently zoned IB, integrated industrial and business in MR Maple Road District. Mr. Sabran?
Yeah, want me to do this one? Sure. So you remember Midtown Place Apartments was first known as Millennial Place Apartments. They changed the name. It's located on Livernois Road, south of Maple, immediately south of the movie theater. There's presently, there was a Farmer Jack's building that was kind of blighted and they tore it down, and then there's a FedEx there. The application received preliminary site plan approval some time ago. Huh.
It must be at the end.
Ah. You're good. Thank you. I came here to test it and I forgot to put it back. There, thank you.
See, you just had a law degree.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the approved elevations. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but it shows a contrast, very modern design. And the applicants come back with revised elevations. And Manny is here representing the Jacobson Group. But I'm not an architect, but I had no issue with the other ones, but these are pretty darn nice, in my opinion. But I'm not a voting member of the Planning Commission. But Manny's here. Manny, do you want to take over? Do you want the clicker, or want me to? I can do the slides if you want.
I thought that was it for the.
Okay, that is it. But if you need to negotiate around, just let me know and I'll.
Okay, no, I just wanted to tell you the reason why we're changing
Please
it.
step
So,
up to the mic.
Mic.
Thank you.
oh, So we were working on the architectural plans, had regular meetings with our architect, Alexander Bogarts. And then we started to notice that that design, we were starting to see it almost everywhere, on all of the lifestyle centers, on commercial buildings, you know, very popular style. And we were kind of getting more and more disillusioned a little bit because we wanted to do something really special. So then the 5 Points apartment complex went up across from Oakland University on Squirrel Road, and it looked almost exactly like what we were proposing, different colors, same architect. So we thought, okay, we want to take a whole new fresh look at this. So we actually got together with the design team downtown in the Fox Building, Patrick Thompson, a bunch of young architects, and asked them to take a look to see if they could come up with some ideas. So they came up with concepts and whatnot. Eventually, they got massaged between Alexander Bogart's office and the architects that were just acting kind of as design consultants to come up with these elevations, which we think are, very unique, very different. And the intent is we will alternate buildings. You see there in the inset, in the patios, that will be some form of either, it might be real wood, it might be kind of an aluminum wood siding that you're starting to see on a lot of buildings. And that will be our accent. And the color might change just a little bit. It's going to be very, very close to what you see there. And then the first floor will be brick. On half of the buildings, it'll be black. On the other half, it'll be white. And then above that, we actually have metal panels. They're vertical metal panels made of aluminum, and they will be a combination of black and white. And that's pretty much the only change really that we're making to what was previously approved is just this whole different concept. And it's a little hard to see in these drawings, which are the architect's drawings, flat on. So you really have to kind of see the renderings to really kind of appreciate what it will look like. Because black buildings, dark buildings are, they're hard to render, particularly on plans. So we hope you like them. We're excited about it. It's going to be really different. And we are at this point shooting hard for an early July start. Our engineering plans are about 95% approved. We're just making one little change. We expect to get approval next week. We're well on our way for our financing. And hopefully everything will be in place and we can start right after July 4th.
So the only thing that they're before us in terms of approval this evening is the elevations. The site plan's not changing. That's how the buildings look. So, and in terms of the overall building design, this was a significant enough change from the approved elevations that, like, they weren't swapping out from light blue to lighter blue. It wasn't something like that. This is a more dramatic change, so this had to go back to Planning Commission for consideration. So that's why we're here this evening.
Brent, was there a picture of the original elevation?
There was only renderings for this PowerPoint.
Question. Years ago, flat roofs were really high maintenance. Is it changed or is it still an issue?
No, we actually considered flat roofs. They're not really high maintenance. They are more expensive. It's a different kind of construction. We're going to have, some higher ceilings inside. And eventually, it doesn't really go with this architecture because this is kind of a blend between traditional and modern, and that was kind of the intent. It would have gone better with the other ones. As a matter of fact, that was one of the things we kind of decided we didn't like about the other ones was the pitched roofs behind those parapets in the front, so we were seriously considering flat roofs. But then when we went to this design doesn't work with flat roofs.
So is your floor plan for the unions changed at all? Or?
Not really. Well, the only thing that we did change, and this is something that we discussed with Brent, we made on one end of the buildings where we had a 2-bedroom and a 1-bedroom, we changed that to 2 studios and a small 1-bedroom, so that we would have, now we have, I forget exactly how many, but we have about 10% or 11% studios, because in our market study, we think, again, because of the appeal to millennials, trying to, to get them out of their parents' basements, and I have one, the intent was to see if we can get them in there for under $1,000, something that would be more affordable. But they're nice studios. They're nice size studios.
And just to clarify, so Manny and Scott came to us and said we're proposing to change the floor plans, but because it was increasing it was a 2-for-1 studio for 1 and 2 bedrooms. The parking's the same.
Right.
A parking requirement for a studio is 1, so they would swap out some 2 bedrooms, which are 2 spaces, for 2 studios. It didn't change the parking count, it didn't change the.
How many square feet are the studio? About-
The studios?
Yeah.
They're about 575 square feet, so they're really, and the one bedroom is about 650, 675, that small one bedroom, whereas our normal bedrooms are about 745. So they're really not that much smaller. They actually could almost be one bedrooms if we didn't have if we had a full wall. But if we put in a full wall, then they wouldn't be studios and they would require 2 parking spaces. So we're going to probably have a half wall or something. Kind of creative. We have a designer working on just how those are going to look. So kind of excited because it gives us more variety. So now we have, 4 different types: studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments by the Planning Commission? Mr. Evans?
When I looked at these, first looked at them, I thought it's great. I think they're actually better than what we looked at before. I'm very pleased, and I think it's a rather, like you say, it's a blend between modern and traditional, so I'm very much.
Glad you like them. We've had mixed results. I would say the majority of people like them, and the rest of them go, man, I don't know. And that's kind of the intent. We want them to be a little edgy. If everybody just said, oh, great, then they'd be boring.
Is your roof asphalt shingles?
Yes.
Is that what?
Yes. Yeah.
Is the intent to actually not create too much contrast between the between the elevations and the siding and the roof? Is that
Well, partly, because we figured it's really kind of, it's almost a board and batten metal siding look. And when we considered the metal, standing seam metal roof, there wasn't enough contrast. It kind of took away from the metal siding.
Mr. Tagle?
Yeah, I guess I'm one of the guys that preferred the original look. Honestly, I think the original look was something that people could say, wow. I think what I'm seeing here in this renovation, or these revised elevations, I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's not bad, but it's just okay. And then and I guess one of the things, as far as the articulation of the masses and the coloring, there are certain elevations that do a nice job of intermixing colors, and then I look at certain elevations and they're all dark. And again, I'm not sure about the dark building sitting on a white base. I don't know. It just seems rather average to me.
Okay.
So I'm not a fan of the revised elevations, but I think you had a winner first time around.
Yep. Just want to throw my couple comments in there. I concur with John Tagle on that. As far as design, I think the original ones had more interest to look at. This one, what you have now is it's just so similar to me. You can see all the different types. I mean, I could find, if I lived in the one with red brick, I could find my place. With the other one, like, okay, now where am I? It's just, they're too similar. But then again, it's, both are fine. I prefer the original. That's my personal.
They will alternate. If you look at that rendering, you'll see the next building on the line has the white brick on the bottom and then it's dark on top. So
I understand. Yeah, I understand that. But
Okay.
It's,
Yeah, it's a very subjective.
it is, obviously.
It is.
And that's why, and especially if you get a bit edgy, and that was a little bit of the intent. But it's, as I say, the majority of people like it, but a minority just aren't sure about it. But it's unique.
Orange elements, where are they? And that's the wood.
That's the wood. Yeah, those are going to be inside the patios.
Okay.
So inside the patio walls for a couple of reasons. One, to give access to the buildings, and the second, so that we don't bake the people that are sitting there with the sun shining on the building.
I think they look kind of Scandinavian.
That's partially where the inspiration came from.
We're Michigan, right?
I know, but I think that
That's
there's
very
a little
good.
You're right.
Scandinavian element to it that, I mean, I like them. I like them, and I'm surprised that I do, because normally something like this would not appeal to me. But I sort of like the Swedish or Scandinavian feel to it. I don't know.
Maybe part of it is the clean lines of the windows. Actual is very.
I like lots of windows,
Like,
and
very-
I like
very
tall
clean.
ceilings, and it appeals to me.
Is the white, is that actually brick?
Yes.
Is that all brick? So it's not painted
The-
brick? Is
It might be painted brick. We're trying to decide whether we would do painted brick or whether we would do white brick. But it's, the first level is all brick.
So that's not decided yet if you're painting that. I mean, what about the maintenance aspect of painting that brick on a?
Oh, we've talked about that, yeah. Probably every, 5 years or maybe 7 years or whatever, it would probably have to be resprayed. But it's on the ground level, which is easy to do.
Why so much dark? I mean, you've presented a potential longboard product.
Yes.
As a wood.
Yes.
And to reinforce what Karen has said, maybe you bring some of that wood from in the patio or balcony areas out to the facades of the building. It just seems like this. I mean, I look at this elevation, and the minute I get past this point, all I see is dark.
Well, if you want a candid answer, Scott. Scott loves dark black buildings. He loves them. He takes pictures of them all over the U.S. He was the one that really argued for making, having that much dark, because he thought it was really going to be spectacular. I would have put more of the lighter elements in myself, but again, as I say, it's very subjective. The other thing that we're going by a bit is, these young designers, they say young, but they're probably in mid-20s to mid-30s.
That's young.
And they,
Qualifies.
and they come,
That's Claire Young.
they come from other architectural firms, and they're kind of, avant-garde and whatnot. And so they're telling us that this is really going to appeal to, that age group that they are a part of. So we are a little bit also relying on the fact that, hey, Scott and I, we're too old to figure out whether, exactly what that younger age group wants, but they were really excited about, making this dark. They were fighting to keep it dark. They didn't even particularly want to do the wood, but I think the wood's going to really add to it.
Well, again, I understand the dark. I'm not opposed to dark buildings, but I think there's just so much of it. There's an imbalance here. There's not the richness. Like I don't know if you're familiar with the longboard product, but that can bring
Yes.
a real richness to
Oh, yeah.
the look of this building. Now,
Right, I agree.
if your market is 20-year-olds,
Yeah.
and that's it,
Yeah.
I don't know.
The longboard's very expensive. They're basically
Sure.
horizontal aluminum panels. And you literally have to go up and tap them to figure out that they're not wood. It's that good. And it comes in, 12 or 15 probably shades of wood. So we're using them as accents or something similar to that. There are other products that are similar. But again, everybody is, when I say everybody, the designers and Scott just really like that dark black look. Yes.
I mean, I'm not exactly a millennial, but I have to say that the original elevations, I've seen millions of buildings like it. Your design is definitely unique. It's something I haven't seen before, and I think it's a very cool building to live in. So if I had to give my input, I think it's pretty cool.
Appreciate it. And I have to say, what did it for us, it's not that we didn't like the old elevation. We did. We were excited about it until we started to see it everywhere.
Yeah.
But the 5 Points building on Squirrel Road was, when we looked at it, we said, that's our building. A little bit different colors, but that's exactly the same building. So after that, we thought, you know what, it's not going to be unique anymore. And unique was important to us. Something people would talk about, something, kind of a landmark.
Mr. Krantz.
Just one quick comment to help with the dreariness of the dark color. As you'll probably note in Norwegian landscapes or Nordic architecture, as Karen brought out, they put a lot of flowers out, and that pops against the dark. So yeah, if I saw a lot of color in there on the balconies, that would, be helpful. But you can't control that. But I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Okay, and you know what, we may build the first building and come back and say, you know what, we want to make a little bit of a modification. We'll see, because these buildings are, are kind of built sequentially, they're not built all at once. So hopefully it will look as everybody, as, you know, has in their mind's eye, but if it doesn't, then we can certainly make changes.
Just curious, was at all any of your iterations, did any of your iterations include any other color for that inset in orange? Or a
Oh, yeah,
variation?
we did have, yes, we did have, I mean, we didn't have it rendered, but we did look at materials that were much more orange, less tan, more orange. I mean, almost every color looks good against that as an accent. Could even be done in white, you know, but I think the wood look is what, no, not white.
Not white, no, an earth tone. You need some sort of an earth tone in there.
I think the second picture kind of, you know, maybe emphasizes it a little better. Well, maybe it's emphasized better in the ones that you have in front of you rather than on the slide where you can see it a little more clearly. But it's meant to really give those accents. And if, you know, we looked at a lot of stuff on Google to where you have, you know, many buildings around the world, and these ones that are kind of tend to be, you know, just a couple of colors carried through, and then they have that accent color that we really like that. So we wanted to pick up on that accent color.
What are you proposing for your material for your window frame, for your actual,
It's going to be black.
what kind of material?
Don't know yet. We haven't selected the windows exactly. It could be fiberglass, it could be vinyl, could be metal. Black vinyl is difficult to find. It's very expensive, so, you know, I'm not sure, but, and plus those windows are really large, so, and we have to have egress on them, so it gets a little tricky, because they have to be, you know, like that bottom portion has to be big enough for emergency egress, if it's in a bedroom.
Mr. Tate?
How much did cost enter into the redesign?
How much did it cost?
No. How much did cost enter into the decision to?
So this is more
redesign?
expensive.
What's that?
This is more expensive than what we had originally. The metal panels,
That was on the original one.
yeah, but this is
metal siding,
actually.
isn't it?
Pardon?
This is standard metal siding, isn't it? Vertical metal siding? That's industrial.
I don't know if it's, I don't think it's standard. It's, I couldn't tell you exactly. I know the architects, our designers downtown did quite a bit of research to pick this particular siding.
Okay, thank you.
Plus the redesign with Mr. Bogarts was pretty expensive.
Any other, yeah, Mr. Faison?
I had a question for you, Brent. I think that there was a comment made that they would build maybe the first building with this design and based on reception may tweak the design later. So I'm curious as to if we approve this today, how much flexibility do they have to use a different elevation as they build subsequent phases?
It would only be different colors. We wouldn't redesign the elevations, we would just use different colors.
So if it's significant, if we make a determination if it's significant, and I would have discussions with Julie and Ben and Mark Miller probably, and determine if it was significant. So if it's a change, 3-degree change in the pitch of the roof, you know.
Understood.
That's the best way. Without having an example, it's hard for me to answer that question. But if it was a significant change, like, you know, for example, what we're dealing with tonight's a significant change, we come back to the planning commission.
Okay. So the intent would be for it to look
Maybe
largely like this.
It should look like this.
And that sounds like that's the applicant's intent.
Right. Well, if it wasn't, he wouldn't be here. He'd be here with different drawings. So yes, it's his intent. Correct.
Right, no, understood, but I guess I was getting at if there's a less reception than anticipated.
So,
I-
so if it's going to change, then he'd call me and we'd probably come back if it was significant back before the planning commission.
You answered my question,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Mr. Grant?
I'm just gonna, ready for resolution?
Yep. Are we ready for our resolution? I think we are. Okay.
Want me to do it?
Yep, go ahead.
Get resolved that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed elevation revisions for Midtown Place Apartments located south of Maple on the east side of Livernois 1300 through 1310 Livernois, Section 34, within the IB Integrated Industrial and Business and MR Maple Road districts be granted.
Moved by Mr. Trent, seconded by Mr. Faison. Roll call, Mr. Sullivan, please.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Senzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
No.
Mr. Epahedian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Item
When do
number-
you expect the first building to be up?
Assuming we can start our site work in, right after July 4th, we'll probably figure 60 days for site work, and then we'll start the buildings in September. And the first building will probably be 8 months till delivery, and then we should get an additional building delivered about every 2 months afterwards.
You have a general contractor
Yes.
picked up? I'm
Yes.
curious.
We haven't announced it yet because we haven't signed the contract
Okay,
with
I'm
them.
sorry, that's fine.
But I
Thank
think
you.
we do. I think we do.
I hate to see another Amber Apartments.
No, and I can say it's somebody in your community.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In Troy. Troy.
That's my guess.
Item number 6, potential rezoning. Proposed rezoning for multifamily residential development located on the west side of John R. north of Big Beaver, Section 23, from R1E, one family residential, and MF multifamily residential districts to UR urban residential district. Mr. Carla.
Yeah, thank you. Brett and I have recently met with the applicant and their team in regards to this potential rezoning. They have given us a concept site plan. There were no elevations attached with it for this proposed rezoning. So the applicant tonight is looking for feedback from the Planning Commission on the proposed rezoning, as well as any feedback on the site plan, the concept site plan that you have in your packet. Just for a little background, this is a approximately 15.7 acre site located on John R. and Big Beaver, just north of the Troy Sports Complex, and this is the Kroger's facility right here. The proposal includes the large vacant parcel just to the north, which is the detention pond that fronts on John R., as well as the back part of the San Marino Club facility. We do note that it is adjacent to the build-out of a single-family residential neighborhood that is just in the completion of being built out at this time. The zoning includes multifamily on the large vacant parcel. In the back half of San Marino Club is R1E. We do note there's a question mark about the EP zoning. There's a section of EP zoning that's just north of the San Marino Club. From the application submitted, it appears that this is included in the application. However, we haven't confirmed that with the applicant about exactly if it does include the EP section or not. So that's in question moving forward. But it would require the rezoning of this entire red area to UR. The site in question is outlined generally in white. It is zoned, it is master planned as Big Beaver corridor. You'll see there's a large jump in the Big Beaver across Rochester Road getting into this section here on John R. on both the northwest corner and the southeast corner of Big Beaver and John R. is master planned for Big Beaver. The intent of the urban residential district is it recognizes that certain areas of the city that may be conducive to high-density residential dwelling, particularly those in close proximity to more intense mixed use and non-residential development. The intent of the UR district is to provide high-density multifamily housing, which provides for urban character, support transit, and encourages walkability. And that's the intent of why the applicant is seeking rezoning to this district. I will note that looking at the zoning map, I believe there's only 2 sections of the city that are currently zoned UR, so this would be a third area of the city that's zoned for that designation. The application in front of you includes the proposed site plan. John R. is located in this section. The applicant would share a drive with the Kroger's access point. There would be approximately 10 separate buildings, which totals 247 apartment units. Amenities include a clubhouse located central. There are a couple, I think I counted 3 park areas, or 4 park areas internal to the development, as well as a fountain pond. The detention pond that on the John R. they would turn into a more of a feature of a fountain pond. Mr. Sauer, can you back up a second? So when considering the rezoning, we consider what can be built by right as well as what can be built under the current or the proposed UR zoning. Based on just density alone, if you took the density that could be built under the multifamily which is currently zoned, they could get about 119 units, and they could get about 18 units plus or minus on the single family. So in total, that's about 137 total units for that area. They're proposing to do 247 units, which is approximately 15.7 units an acre. In terms of height, under the multifamily, they can do 25 feet. Under the single family, they can do 30 feet. The applicant is proposing 2.5 stories. We don't know what that height is, but 2.5 stories for those along the perimeter, along the single family perimeter to the north and to the east, to the west, and 3 stories for the interior buildings. The setbacks under the multifamily are equal to those of the UR. They have to be equal to the height of the building. That's an issue that we did discuss with the applicant. And lastly, the open space in the multifamily requires 20% open space, and the applicant hasn't indicated what the open space of the UR, but it does appear to be more than the 20 space that's required under the multifamily zoning. So tonight, the applicant is seeking feedback from the Planning Commission in both regards to the proposed rezoning to UR, as well as the concept site plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle?
Can I add one thing?
Yep, please, Mr.
It's,
Carlisle.
it doesn't jump out at you when you look at the site plan, but this is an easement, an underground gas line. Correct, Mr. Butler? Correct. So the reason I bring it up is this is zoned EP, and there are limitations to what can go on here, so I wouldn't be surprised if this were to remain EP, because they're very limited in terms of what they can do in that corner.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Before you begin giving feedback, I did speak with Ms. Bloom, and she wanted me to, we're both a little nervous about this discussion, so we just wanted to remind the Planning Commission that when you give feedback on this particular project, to frame your feedback cautiously. If it does come back as a conditional rezoning, as it says in Ben's report, keep in mind that anything that the applicant's going to offer needs to be voluntary and in writing from there. So if any feedback you provide needs to be framed cautiously. In addition, I see Mr. Staffa in the room. Obviously, Mr. Staffa is not precluded, even though we're engaged in litigation, he's not precluded from being before this body, but that was not outlined in the original report, so I just wanted Planning Commission to be aware.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle at this point? Yes, Mr. Tagle.
I'd like to get just off the top of your head, what do you think about the planning of this site?
It's difficult, Mr. Tagle. It's really hard to tell because it's a concept drawing with limited dimensions on it, no elevations, etc., at a density which is significantly higher than what the underlying zoning would allow. With that being said, there are a lot of elements that do meet the intent of what they're trying to achieve in this district and achieve with the master plan, including higher density, closer to transit, closer to walkable options, closer to mixed-use options. But it's really hard to give a full, detailed assessment with just really one drawing in front of us.
Is there any other zoning that would allow for this high density? Or is this the highest level of density that?
A planned unit development would be the only other option to go through. The UR is the densest, it's the densest residential zoning designation. They could go for a Big Beaver zoning district or something of that nature. We don't have a cap on density, but in terms of a pure residential only product or zoning district, this is the highest density project or zoning designation.
Yeah, Ms. Cruz.
Could we go back to that slide that had the Big Beaver Master Corridor, from the master plan, yeah, where we were talking about the entire site is master planned as Big Beaver Corridor. Okay.
Yeah, the entire site, and you'll notice this is where the sports complex is, and this is where the Kroger is, so it extends all the way down into obviously Big Beaver as well.
Yes,
Also, a little bit of history. This site has been vacant for some time, and when it the zoning prior to it being zoned, prior to it being classified as Big Beaver, it was actually zoned residential elder care, REC. And that was for, Mr. Bostic, 20 years-ish, plus or minus?
Yeah, a little over 20.
A little over 20 years. So it's been zoned for a higher than single-family density for over 20 years. Just for what it's worth.
Actually, I think it was 95.
Yeah, that seems right.
Yeah, Mr. Tagle.
Is there a bus stop on John R? Somewhere in proximity to this? I mean, we talk about transit oriented, and how does that, tell me about that and how that applies to this.
I think there's a bus stop on Big Beaver.
Okay, so the people would walk from here down to Big Beaver.
And we're also, if you remember in the master plan, there's a Big Beaver component, and there's a move across Troy section at the end of the master plan where it talks about walkability not only along Big Beaver but across Big Beaver. And this is going to be our first mid-block crossing. Is going to be on Big Beaver at this location.
Is it it's a little further west though, isn't it?
It's basically a little bit, essentially south of the rink, south of the sports center, essentially.
Right across from
north
Altair.
of these,
Pardon me?
north of the sports center.
No, so there's going to be a mid-block crossing from Altair to basically right here.
Right.
And that's supposed to be coming up this year, isn't it, I think?
I believe so.
Mr. Sutter, that has been started. No, they've already put the.
Yeah, they've
The
done the work
stoplights are
for the
in.
stoplights, that's correct.
Mr. Carlisle, one question. This has come up in the past, and I think this is a relevant topic here. If now we're actually asked to remove a section from the Big Beaver corridor, in terms of stepping down, that whole discussion of stepping down, would rezoning to urban district actually kind of fulfill that requirement or allow this development to create that step down to that single family just to the north? From the maximum height, we got, what's the maximum height of the Troy Sports Complex there?
What's the height,
Of the
current
building?
height?
Right. Do you-
I don't know off the top of my,
Okay.
head.
So,
There are many elements that this fulfills of both the Big Beaver master plan as well as the Big Beaver zoning designation in terms of density of, that's residential density in proximity to Big Beaver, residential density closer to walkable communities. The applicant has voluntarily, the UR allows a much larger, taller height than what the applicant is proposing. So there is some transitional features that this is being proposed. The significant difference between this and simply zoning it to Big Beaver and going through the Big Beaver process is one, the Big Beaver talks about mixed use. This is not a mixed use project. This is basically one use on one site. Now you could call it mixed use if you consider the complex of the whole area, the sports arena, the Kroger, et cetera. Also, they don't have they wouldn't meet the setback and the build-to lines on John R. and the transparency requirements. So there are some elements of the Big Beaver district they wouldn't meet. But in terms of the UR, this does provide a transition in terms of height from the sports complex, the Kroger's, moving back to that residential neighborhood. It is at a higher density than what the multifamily and a higher height than what the multifamily would allow right now under the current zoning.
Mr. Fizzle.
I know it's early in the process, but at what point would there be engagement of the public?
I think the next step is if depending on what feedback they get from the planning commission, they feel comfortable moving this forward, I would suggest before they submit an actual application to our department, we do suggest that they probably go out and meet with the adjacent neighbors. But I think it's largely dependent on what feedback they receive tonight from the planning commission.
Okay.
Certainly before the public hearing of the planning commission. So
No, understood.
I always suggest that before that letter is received in the mail, that the applicant should reach out to the neighbors. It's better to hear it from the applicant than it is from me.
Agreed.
Yeah, Ms. Cooper.
So, the UR height is higher than what they are proposing in this concept drawing.
So based on information that's been provided from the applicant, potential applicant voluntarily, they're proposing to limit the height of the buildings. I believe the architecture, I believe 38 feet is the height.
There's actually there's no limit in the UR.
Yeah, there's no
It's
limit.
unlimited height in terms of zoning. The applicant has conditionally, through their plan, has shown the height to be 38 feet, I believe, or something of that nature.
But we could rezone it UR and then that would give them by right.
If it was a straight rezoning to UR, then yes, they could build whatever's allowed in the UR district at whatever height. The applicant has indicated to us that they would like to go through the conditional rezoning process as part of this discussion.
Now, if you could go to the diagram that shows, yeah, right there. The PUD, what is the height limit on the PUD on the other side of John R., just north of Great Beaver?
The mix, with retail in the front and residential.
Yeah. Is that a
Probably
PUD?
comparable to this. It was a 3-story building. Very comparable to this. Within feet.
Could we rezone it to PUD instead of UR?
Well, there's not been an application submitted yet, but the reason we're here is because this is what they've proposed preliminarily. So could we? Well, I guess we could consider a PUD application, but that's not what's on the table.
We talked about a lot of different zoning options, and basically, we talked about PUD, we talked about other zoning designations, and the applicant, this is what they wanted to build. And so based on what they want to build here, UR really was the best zoning designation for this project. Now, that's why they're here tonight, to hear from the Planning Commission their thoughts on that. But doing it as a PUD doesn't really achieve anything different than what this would achieve under the UR zoning designation.
What percentage of open space is allowed in the UR?
The UR, so at minimum 20%, but the UR also states that no more than 50% of the site can be covered by buildings. So
50%?
By buildings, but that doesn't take into account, you can, parking lots, et cetera, but in total, it's 20% has to be open space.
Do you have an idea of what that is now?
I don't, I didn't get a calculation from the applicant.
It seems like a lot of buildings, a lot of pavement to me. And I would hope, in my mind, I think I would be more favorable if I see some type of more BMPs, more stormwater features on the site, bioswales, grass type entities to allow more forest pavement, those type of things. I think for me, that would really excite me to allow this type of development going if it were more environmentally sensitive to what's being out there. Just all I see is concrete and pavement and rooftops and a pond or two, but it doesn't impress me as far as really a site that is exciting as far as the best management practices go for stormwater management.
Mr. Summit.
I just note that the applicant's engineer is here taking mental notes, nodding his head.
Copious notes.
Ms. Cruz.
I notice as I look at this, and it says in the report that there's quite a bit of single-family homes that are sharing a property line, if you will, with this parcel. And I know that our past experiences indicate that, the neighbors in these single-family homes are not usually thrilled about, a lot of high-density, tall buildings going up right next to them. They're used to a certain amount of privacy in their yards. And I think that, if this plan were going to be a go, it would be beneficial to the developer to make sure that there was really adequate space in between a building and anything that is adjacent next to residential property. I suspect that when we have a public hearing, the neighbors will be concerned about that and the effect it has on their property values. We may hear, that this is going to increase crime. We'll probably also hear something about traffic how this is on the corner of a already congested intersection, and the traffic will be affected with the addition of a high-density development. So I think that these are things that are going to have to be seriously thought through and addressed, and solid solutions found in order for this to be a popular idea.
Mr. Tagle.
Yeah, I touched upon something I was going to bring up about the two-story, or actually a three-story building looking down in the backyard of the single family, and how many times have we been confronted with that concern. And, just wondering if looking at maybe a little different layout of these buildings, instead of running the buildings parallel to the property line, running the building, putting the ends of the buildings against the north property line, and maybe looking at the plan in a little different way, a distribution of how the buildings are laid out, I think would certainly go a long way. I mean, when you just in that first row of residences from the, is that an easement in there? Oh, it's another street, the Floyd Drive. I mean, from there to John R., I mean, you've got two buildings facing all of the backyards, as opposed to if this, let's say this plan was to flip, you'd have the end of one building.
Right.
So I think there are things, as you presented, that we are going to be dealing with from the residents that I think could be addressed a little bit more, a little bit better in the planning of the site.
So just, sorry, go ahead.
Just back to that slide on these units, it's not quite that obvious where the actual garages would be in the driveways for these units. I mean, some of them have the inset there, but some of the actual drawings here don't have that. So I'm guessing they might be identical to that. But I think that, just to kind of piggyback what Mr. Tagle brought up, there are pros and cons of changing the layout where it might actually affect negatively if you put a drive aisle going north-south, where you get vehicles actually pointing headlights straight at the homes there. For example, those two buildings, if you flip them 90 degrees and now you're creating a drive aisle where the residents are parking to the left and to the right, you'll have one location there, at least one resident will have vehicles constantly be directed at their home there. So there are pros and cons to having the buildings parallel in that way, and then flipping them also has the same issue. Yes, Mr. Evans.
I think your issue could probably be addressed with greater landscaping on that. Would that be the south border? North border. Yes, that's one of our recommendations quite often, is that at least they put in dense evergreen shrubs so that the headlights don't go through those. So I think that could be accomplished with that type of a thing. But I do agree that maybe the other orientation of the buildings might be more friendly to the neighbors.
Mr. Sala.
So this is a reminder that Mr. Carlisle has already said this. Just to frame the discussion, just so it's zone multifamily, so they do have the right under this zoning for 137 units on the portion that's zone multifamily. So the leap they're basically asking for is upzoning multifamily where they can do 137 and upzoning single family where they can do 18 to over 200 units. I forget the number here.
It's 247.
247. So it's going from 137 to 247. So just to remind it in terms of a transition area, because we talk about transition and impact on residential. So it's given the fact that there's an ice rink here and significant retail and restaurant development, this site probably isn't appropriate for single-family residential. So multifamily is an appropriate transition. That's why it was zoned multifamily for the last 20-plus years. So the question is it appropriate to upzone it to UR? with the volunteer condition so far of limiting the height to a little under 40 feet, 3 stories, over the entire site. Just to reframe the conversation.
Brent, I don't mean to interrupt, but I thought that we might have a chance to introduce the project, and I do have some additional drawings that would answer a lot of the questions that have already been brought up, if that's okay?
Sure, we can do that. We'll hold off on any questions. We'll let the applicant present the project, and then we can come back with any questions. Sure.
Great, I appreciate it. Members of the commission, I'm Mark Abenatha with Alexander Bogarts, the architects and planners for the project. As Brent mentioned, our civil engineers here, Jim Butler, as well as Dennis and Sam, the developers. We're very excited about this project. We think it's a great fit for the site. We looked at the project from the standpoint of a totality of a mixed-use development, that this would be if we were to take this corner and it was a blank corner, this is how we'd lay it out, with the commercial up front and a multiple family to the back, transitioning to the single family. That is typical, as Brent mentioned, transitional zoning from a main road back. Having done a lot of projects up against single family, and a commission member that brought that point up, that was the very first thing that we looked at on the site and how that would relate. Our buildings, how they relate to the single family, and our buildings and how they relate to the commercial. So what we did was we wanted to have the ends of our buildings facing the commercial, because from a transition standpoint and from a visual standpoint, it's going to be much more attractive for our buildings that are north-south to, use the pointer. To be facing, having ends facing the commercial and having open space and park area and amenities and park area and open space for these units to look at, rather than looking at the back of commercial and parking lots. When it comes to these units, and we're also dealing with a very narrow site here, so there are so many ways that you can skin a cat. And as I said before, we look at all of what's going on around us before we lay the site up. So when it comes to the single family, we actually have 3 different building types. And the first building type are these 4 buildings and this building. These are what we call our 200 building, and that is a 3-story building. Then along the residential, one of the conditions that we're willing to and promoting here, these are actually 2.5-story buildings. The front of the building that you have in your packet, which looks like these fronts here, this would be the front, would be 2-story. The rears we're proposing, 3-story. The rears we're proposing to be 2-story. And I brought a section, and we've done that so that we transition down in height to the single family. We're also proposing to readjust this berm and have a berm here, and we are planning on meeting with the association. We are going to talk to each one of these homeowners that are closest. This starts to flare out here, this opens up and flares out. But we're going to talk to each one of these homeowners and say, the buffering and landscaping and pine trees or whatever that is going to be on that berm and adjacent to your home, we want to make sure that they're comfortable with it from a screening. But because it's 2 stories, you're not going to have that factor of looking down in. It's going to be comparable in height to a lot of the 2-story residences that are there. I'm not sure if there's any ranch units, but as far as scale in the back, and let me show you the section. If I'd known, we could have gotten it where it was in a PDF form.
So the elevations that were provided electronically weren't on the PowerPoint, but they're in the packet. So
yes, which
they've got them in front of them.
I saw that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So these are cross sections through the 3 different product types, and you can see this is what I call our 100 right here that is up against the single family. So you have a 3-story front section, but then in the back you have a 2, where the roof tails down, and then the berm will build up. So you have large screening here that basically screens off the back side of where those windows would be. Then when you go to the interior buildings, which are these buildings right here, as we said, this, and this, which are all closer to the commercial. Those are what we call our 200 building, which would be an all 3-story section. Then this last smaller building here that resulted as the termination and turning of this and the relativity to that gas easement, that's basically in length the same as these, so it's a little smaller than these. But this is also a 2.5-story building, which is our 201 building. So anything that is up against that single family is going to be 2.5-story, or what we feel very comparable in scale to what's there right now. So that was really the thought process behind the overall layout of the project. Coming into the project, what we wanted to do is we wanted to have these fronts not only face this direction relative to what they're looking at here, but as you approach the project on John R. and you come in, we want to have this beautiful open space, and this is the spot for the existing pond and why we're putting the pond here. It's this beautiful fountain, have walks, parallel parking. This is actually a double-fronted building. This is the front. So you have a beautiful window to the project, as well as how it relates to the Kroger that's out front. And then as you progress in, hit this park. This is our community building. This is going to be a state-of-the-art facility that's going to have fitness center, social room, all leasing and management. It'll probably have cyber offices and cafes that are in it, so it'll be all state-of-the-art with a pool. Beyond this park area, more park area here, coming back park, and then more park back in here. So we tried to break up. This is an urban plan. This is a grid. This is typical to urban plans. But we wanted to break it up with beautiful vistas relative to the road. Vistas once we get inside with open space, as well as more open space in here to give people the chance to get out into those open spaces. We can also look at that from the standpoint if there's anything that we can do from a bioswale or a different type of staging before we get to this pond. We can talk with Jim about that, but that was the goal. The other thing is that we've made this totally walkable, where there's sidewalks in front of all of these buildings, and we're connecting here out to the front of the Kroger. We're also connecting here to the ice arena, so that the people that live here can walk from where they live and use the Kroger and use some of the other commercial out front, can come and use the sports facility as well as our commercial. So it's really an end or an end cap to what is already there, to producing an overall beautiful mixed-use building or a project. The elevations that you have, we think that, I call this transitional. They're not contemporary. They're not very real traditional. They're right in between. We put a mix of materials on them. We haven't defined them 100%, but we're going to have horizontal siding that might be hardy plank, or it might be a metal siding. We're going to have some vertical siding that could either be some type of either metal or hardy plank. We could go with metal panels and some of the other details that are in the plans that you have that are big, large sections, or they could be hardy panels. So we want to create an interest of the materials, the different details and gables and window details that are on it, along with different colors that will create a lot of vibrancy and interest on these elevations. And we think that they'll, based on the architecture and the gable detailing and the asphalt shingles, they'll relate well with a single family that's to the north. Unit sizes are probably going to range anywhere from, we have a mix of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. They will probably range from high 6s, 700 for the 100 for 1 bedrooms, to anywhere between 9 to 1100 for the 2s, and then the 3 bedrooms are going to be a little larger. The other nice thing about the project you were mentioning is garages. The garages are all on the ends. For the most part, we do have some garages here, 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 and here. But if you look at the elevation, we've put 1-car garage doors, and they kind of recess into all the detailing, so that a lot of apartment projects don't necessarily have garages these days, but a lot of the new ones do. And so we're going to have as many as 18 garages on these buildings and 12 on these. These don't have any garages on the smaller. This is going to be all green space. But we've tried to make the pedestrian and the architecture read and let the garage doors be hidden more on the ends or subdued on that front elevation. So the conditions are really, when you look at this project, how does it relate to what's going on around it, and how does it relate to the single family? And that's what we're willing to do, is to try and step this project down and make it a cohesive part of the mixed-use development. In order to go from the regular RM density, which is 10 units per acre, a real good threshold to look at in multifamily is a minimum of 200 units to have a state-of-the-art clubhouse and have proper management of the project. You're also going to have maintenance garage that is in that clubhouse to take care of a project like this. So we're really looking at rooftops to come into the community and support the retail and the commercial that's there, but also have enough density to make the project viable. It's just not viable at that 10 units per acre, nor do we think it fits, you know, the real urban character of this mixed development. So I think those are most of the high points that I wanted to mention to you that weren't really brought out in, you know, some of the documents that were sent. Hoping to basically do that at this point in time. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you have about the project.
Thank you. Mr. Edmonds.
I was out there the other day, and the area behind the Tremonti, the old Tremonti restaurant, which is now going to be a new Italian place.
Cantero.
I'm sorry?
Cantero.
Cantero, all right. Is that area, right now, it has a lot of soccer goals, and I see it was posted that in order to use those fields, you had to get written permission from the Troy Sports Center. Where does this encompass, does this site plan encompass that area behind the old Tremonti restaurant?
This is the area that's back behind San Marino right here.
Yes, it is, right. But is that included in this?
Yes, if you go back to the site plan, I can show you where that break point is.
Okay. That would be helpful.
This is the restaurant you're talking about here.
Right.
And this would basically be the breakpoint line, property line right there.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is the area that's back behind.
Okay.
And then this is the area that's currently zoned multifamily, and this is that single family as the easement.
Thank you.
Mr. Tate.
The elevation that we have in the packet shows, I think, are those 6 garage doors?
Correct.
And what units, what,
Those are on the 100 buildings, this building, this building, this building, and this building. You can see them, we're basically tapping an apron through the parking lot there, so they'll have apron parking as well as the garage doors. So that's where they are.
and how many units, the units now that are perpendicular to that, how many units are in those buildings?
These are 24 unit, let me see, 26 unit buildings. Yes, those are 26 unit. These 5 buildings right here are 26 unit buildings. These are 24 unit buildings, and this is a 21 unit building.
How does the parking work on the 26 unit buildings? Do you have parking under the building? I guess maybe that's the question.
No, on the ends of the buildings, right here and
Yeah.
here, we have apron parking and garages. Each one of these buildings have 12 garages in the building and then apron parking, and then we have open parking to handle the guest and spillover for that. We're anticipating 2 cars per unit, plus guests, plus parking at the clubhouse. So we felt that we're well parked. We're doing a lot of projects now where we're actually below 2 units per acre, or 2 units, 2 cars per unit, where we're in anywhere from 1.5 to 1.8, and the project's parked fine.
Any other questions for the applicant? Any other comments, Mr. Sutton?
Unit mix, are any of these units appropriate for an empty nester or retiree?
You always say that and I always forget to say that, yeah. It's great, this product, I mentioned it when we met with Ben and Brent. This is what we call a stacked ranch product, and you can see that in these sections. So all of these first floor units can be empty nester. And especially with the garages, you know, to be able to have a garage and have a ranch unit right on that first floor. So there's a large number of units that this can cater to a broad spectrum of BC.
And so
Thanks for bringing that up.
so there are no elevators in these buildings.
No, there are not. You don't typically get into an elevator until you go to a 4-story building. That's industry standard.
Any other thoughts? Mr. Sada.
So the purpose of the meeting is to provide feedback on this, on the concept level. So it's concepts, there's no dimensions, there's not a lot of information. So we're kind of at that 1,000-yard distance conceptually. So what they're looking for is feedback from a conceptual scale on this potential development.
One of the thoughts I had when just looking at this initial layout was, I don't think the density is too high for this site. One of my main concerns here is that the buildings to the north have sufficient setback, sufficient buffering, and that berm, whatever that height of that berm would be, that the combination of the berm and the landscaping actually provides that separation there between the single-family residential. But in terms of the units to the south that are closer to the commercial area, you know, that area is more, in terms of the setback, that's more of a design, you know, what's the minimum setback that you can get in terms of getting that minimum buffer and the setback just to get that layout in there, because I think the concern would be more for the residential to the north and not the commercial to the south. We won't have anybody in the sports arena complaining that those units are too close to the south. That's kind of my point.
Yeah, when we laid this out, the buildings where we have the garages on the ends, and I have it in a cross-section, this is basically at the minimum of 38 feet. But from the property line to the back of these buildings, it's roughly 48 feet. So that's a very good setback in terms of, and the fact that it's only, that would be a good setback for a 3-story building, but the fact that it's only going to be 2-story, that's a good setback. And then when you couple that with the landscape, and you know, as I mentioned, we'll talk to the neighbors about the materials that go in there and providing that buffer. So I think that that's going to be a very comfortable setback.
That's the Kroger I go to the most, and I know that street that goes out onto John R. under where the fountain is, with I don't know how many hundreds of cars more. I just wonder the traffic on that road. It's already not, certain times of day it's fine, but certain times of day it's not.
Is there a light there?
So I would be curious what the traffic engineer had to say about that.
And that's the one way in and the one way out, right? Off of that road?
We haven't vetted.
It's two-way, I think.
Yeah.
We haven't vetted this because
No,
there
no,
hasn't
it's
been an
the way
application yet.
in and out of
Yeah,
that
yes,
development,
yeah.
the only way in and out.
Yeah, there's not a light there now. This obviously would require a full traffic study and traffic review by the engineering department, which may require, based on standards, that they do put a light in. We don't know yet, it hasn't been vetted by any of the internal departments at this point, but yeah, that is a point that will be heavily studied as this moves forward.
Can this project be looked at, so just to piggyback to what Ms. Cooper said here, if it would be a, let's say, single-family residential project here, and you have your main access point to the public road. Now, this is, the access point to Kroger is more of it's more of a private road access, right? Is that what it is, or is that a public road?
Actually, the public road ends right here.
So, okay, so the
this
public
part is
road-
actually public, is public.
Okay. If that's the public road, then the access point from the proposed development would be on a public road before exiting to John R., right? I mean, that's what it seems like it is. So,
if I could make a comment?
Sure.
I'm Dennis Bostic. We own the sports center and the vacant property there, but that, you know, we would expect that a lot of people will exit and enter from Big Beaver because you can go through our complex.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't expect there would be that much traffic going out to John R., especially for people that are going to work. There's not a whole lot of employment to the north on John R. But I would expect Big Beaver would get a lot more traffic. We do have a new stoplight that's going to be the walkable area.
Right, and that, yeah, thank you for your comment. And actually, that was going to be my comment on this, that when traffic analysis, when traffic analysis gets done on this, can cross-traffic be considered through another development if there's only an agreement that there's cross-traffic, or can that be considered as an access point, multiple access points? Because if we look at this, there would be multiple access points to that development, even through the back of the sports arena. Can those be considered as access points to this development?
Well, I think the quick answer is yes. Now, presently, the owner of the sports center and the owner of this property is the same person who's sitting behind you. But however, we all know that property can change hands. So moving forward, we probably, although it sounds kind of ridiculous at this point, would see cross-access so that moving forward, there would be full cross-access so that there would be all the potential traffic movements would be legal. So
Right.
there wouldn't be trespassing involved. There would be cross-access to permit that, so it would work.
Okay. So in the actual detailed analysis of the warrant study for a signal there is a possibility that even though you get such high density there, that a signal might not be warranted because you have so many access points through the lower part of the existing development.
And that would be part of the traffic study, would be
Right.
consideration of
Okay.
those potential movements.
But I assume part of the traffic study too is that I don't know if they're going to encourage a lot of traffic to go through parking lots, essentially, these are parking lots for other developments, so.
Right.
I think they're going to want to make sure that they review it with both the context of safety as well as driver behavior. So I'm not sure how realistic or feasible it is for people to be cutting through the parking lot. Maybe that's probably something that they do find that out, but that'll come out in the study.
I was just wondering, relative to the, there's the drive in front of Kroger's, there's the space between the back of Kroger and the rink, and then there's on the west end of the rink. Is there a light at any one of those points that come out? I know when you go across Kroger, that the road kind of shifts a little bit and then eventually works its way out on the Big Beaver, but there's not a signal there. No. And it's, in fact, looking at that, you run into, between the two buildings, you run into the back of the strip center.
There's a signal, there's going to be a signal here.
Okay, so to
Correct.
get
Correct.
from,
There is-
Dennis, correct?
Yes,
Right
that's correct. That's a
There.
brand
There
new.
is, there is.
And there's one further north on John R. North of the property.
Chili's, yeah.
I think
That's quite a way.
to the point that we were talking about, to get from here to here, you either have to go
Yeah.
out or you have to go in front of the Kroger's or behind and kind of weave through the parking area, so. And that'll be studied as part of traffic studies, what the likelihood of people doing that or not doing it.
This is, yeah, Mr. Evans.
Well, I think the project definitely has merit. As we all have agreed, there are a lot of unanswered questions. But I think this is a very appropriate use for this large parcel of land. We were talking about access points, cross-access. I know the San Marino Club would not be happy with any kind of cross-access down in that far area there. So that would not be a possibility, but maybe the developer should look at putting a road through there on the south end that is totally dedicated to just those people who occupy those apartments. So even if it's a narrow road, you know, it's just wouldn't have to necessarily be a, what is it, the 65-foot right of way and all that kind of stuff. It could be a private road just for the use of those folks. That's what I would at least ask them to consider. But I do think the project has merit.
Any other thoughts, Mr. Sansika?
I just reiterate what I said before. I think this site has a lot of potential. I think that the transition in height from the buildings from the north to the south is well taken. The architect did a good job, but I do think the site doesn't have any pizzazz to it. I mean, as far as the landscaping, the facilities at the site, and you know, one site that comes to my mind that I was really impressed with was with the development on Maple, just east of Coolidge, that multi-story building. I don't know if it was ever developed or not, but they did it. They had a great use of you know, bioswales, best management practices with stormwater management, and this site just doesn't have any pizzazz to it as far as I'm concerned. It's for landscaping and for the even for the interest of the residents. I see some open space, but you know, I think you can do a lot more for the residents to manage the site than what you have there. But I believe that for Mr. Evan, the site has a lot of merit, and I think it potentially could be a very nice development.
But does the where will the runoff be handled? Is it going to be into this pond? Is that actually a retention center?
Yeah.
That's the existing detention facility, not only for this site, it's also for the sports center. It backs up, there's a pump station located right here that goes into the Kingsbury. So all this storm.
How is the water goes to surface water? Or?
What's that?
It's all surface water?
It's all surface water, yeah. Which we're gonna reconfigure. You can see how our plan is proposing to reconfigure it and try and treat it as an amenity. And to Mr. Sanzika's point, you know, there are some opportunities that we're gonna look at for stormwater management.
Yeah.
To be able to create that amenity, there's gonna have to be some balance to do what we wanna do.
Thank you.
So I think the, kind of what came out from tonight's meeting and feedback and comments is this site has merit for this development to actually be considered for this site. There exists that element of transition from what's being proposed or suggested. The architectural element of transitioning, especially the buildings in the back from a 3-story to a 2-story, is also appealing in terms of that direct perimeter right there to that residential area. So just kind of my general thought, I think this project has merit to be developed, to what's being proposed there. Yes, Mr.
So
Sona.
I'm going to come back to that number. So what I've heard numerous planning commissioners say is that this number is okay as long as the layout is all right, including landscaping, amenities, and sustainable stormwater management, and as long as the transition between the single-family residential to the north and this development is appropriate, and so long as traffic works. So if the other details are taken care of, then this number's okay. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm looking at that number, and I'm also looking at the units per acre. And I think that we've had projects in the past where units per acre were significantly higher and approved also. So relative to those projects, I think this is lower density, even though the units are higher.
So I think that's a good point, Mr. Chairman. So I believe Rochester Commons, which is which are 60 condominiums located on the north side of Big Beaver. So it's less than a mile west of here, north side of Big Beaver, is 18 units an acre.
Those are micro units.
Yeah, they're all vertical.
Right, right.
So it's in the same ballpark.
Same ballpark.
That was a PUD.
Mhm.
One question.
Mr.
The
Stanzik.
buildings along the north perimeter, are those like 2 and 3 bedroom, single-family units? Is that?
In the single-family residential develop to the
Yeah.
north?
There's a lot of actually, couldn't go to the,
Yeah, so we were looking at Google Earth.
there's a lot of.
No, the proposed development.
Oh,
The building along the north edge.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What are the units? How are they? Are those 2 and 3 story units?
I would defer to the architect on this question.
I was trying to understand,
Yeah.
in my mind, what
They're,
the units are.
they're stacked ranch units. So each unit, all of the living space, all of the bedrooms are all on one level, and they just stack.
So there'd be
One on top of
three
another.
units in the front and 2 units in the back? or-
Correct.
So it'd be, oh, I see, wow.
Yes.
And to get to them, you have to
You
go
use-
upstairs.
You use a common stair to get. Correct. You're either, like we said, a large percentage of them are all on the first floor, and then above that, you have basically a third, not a third, a little less than that on the first floor, and then you transition up above that.
So they're all one floor, story units?
All one floor, whether it's a 1-bedroom unit, whether it's a 2-bedroom unit, or whether it's a 3-bedroom unit. Normally, the 3-bedroom units are in the corners adjacent to the garage, so some of them might even have direct access to the garage, so. yes.
Isn't this similar to Caswell Corners? Those are all stacked branches. There was-
The Caswell, PUD, South Boulevard in Rochester, the ones behind are stack ranches, yes.
Ms. Cruz.
This is my opinion, I don't have any basis in this, but I think that on this project, design is going to matter. Architecture is going to matter. As I sit here and I think about different projects around the city where we've had particular amount of pushback, you know, if you're a person and you're living in a single-family neighborhood, single-family residential neighborhood, and you're beginning to watch the green space around you disappear. If you know that it's going to be replaced with something, you sort of want it replaced with something that is palatable, not something that you find to be obnoxious, like obnoxiously tall or designed. I guess where I'm trying to go with this is you know, we all know that I live just up the road here on the west side of Livernois, and as our green space began to disappear, we had a project. It's the, Brent help me, it's that eye surgery center. That was the first project that was a rezoning.
It was the first conditional rezoning application.
That went next to our subdivision. And I think that it got passed with nary a hiccup, right? I mean, there was no one in my subdivision that really got worked up about that. And it was because the developer worked with us. And it was because the developer came up with a design that blended in with what was already in our neighborhood and use materials that were already existing on the homes. I'm not suggesting that that's what you have to do. I'm suggesting that it may make people a little less worked up if what goes in there is visually appealing and there's flow and it's not an architectural or design style that is so foreign. Okay, so now I'm going to take an example of something that's foreign, and that's sort of the Amber apartment buildings that's just a few feet down. It doesn't match the senior citizen center across the street. It doesn't flow with the commercial buildings that it sits next door to. And so and there was a lot of opposition in my subdivision for that. So my suggestion is, you know, as you think about design and you think about how you're going to introduce that to the homeowners, if you come up with something that works and blends and creates a buffer and you can do something to minimize the traffic impact, you stand a much better chance for making this project get approved.
Anything else, Mr. Sutton? Anything else from the applicant? Any other comments, any other thoughts?
I would just like to make a comment. My family's owned that property since 1957. I grew up there. Our original house was right there where the Kroger store is. And back to the comments you made, ma'am, is we worked with all the residents when we built that whole complex. And if anybody knows Mayor Stein, she was mayor at that time. We had the largest turnout ever for rezoning that night at council. It was the largest turnout ever in favor of a rezoning for the complex we built. We did not get it conditional. I don't think they were legal at that time. It was an absolute zoning to commercial. We could have done anything we wanted. We could have built a Walmart, a Kmart back then. They were all viable, Kmart even. But we did exactly what we said we would do. We built an ice rink, we built a retail. We did it exactly the way that we promised we would do. So we have a reputation in town, and I don't intend to diminish that reputation. We'll work with the people, and we'll do what we say we're gonna do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All set?
I think.
Thank you
we're
very
good.
much. All set?
Yep.
Thank you very much for your time and your comments. We really appreciate it.
I look forward to seeing you back
Very
again.
great, thanks.
Good night.
We'll move on to item number 7, public comment for items on the current agenda. Seeing that there's nobody left in the audience, we can move on to planning commission comments, item number 8 on the agenda. Mr. Faison.
Just a question. Was that a new process where we talk about it conceptually before we really have?
No, we've done it.
Well, we've done it.
You were absent.
Before my time. Because I was just a little uncomfortable with like, what are we approving? Right? Or what are we?
Yeah. Well, you notice there's no resolution. So
Understood. No, understood.
Yeah. So that's a good question. So sometimes we have the similar type meetings, but it's a smaller scale development and there's more detail because the applicant knows exactly what this is going to be and they know exactly what they want. So there's more. Where this was more of a true concept meeting.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you. That was it.
Yeah. Mr. Taylor.
Nothing tonight.
Ms. Cooper.
The whole idea of more development, and somebody at the last public hearing said that, somehow we're getting something out of it, our pockets, something going into our pockets. I just wonder, how do we get across that we're all volunteers here? And there's no benefit to any one of us individually. I think that it's something the community needs to understand. It's a piece of private property. There are laws, and we have to abide by them when we approve. And it's how do we get that across the public, that by right?
Oh, that by right it's tricky. It's a tricky one.
Not another comment, but I just feel like we talk about that a lot more these last meetings, of what can be done. That was a focus of this presentation, and always talking about the parallel plan when we talk about clusters. But I think to your point, I think we got to keep talking about it because it seems like people don't really absorb it, or maybe we have different audiences as different projects come in. But it is an issue.
I just want to note that it's a very obvious, notable difference, because I do a lot of observing, and just in the last few meetings, especially the last few public hearings, it's very, very, very obvious to me that all of you not only explain, especially with the PowerPoints, what could be here by right and what is, and make the argument very clear on what we're considering and what our jurisdiction is, especially Ms. Cruz. Every time I think you bring up, this is not within our jurisdiction, and this is what we can discuss, and that is incredibly useful. But also, especially last public hearing, taking notes of what people said and then addressing them and having them hear what they said being listened to. That was very noticeable to me, and I think that's a really positive step. And we need to keep doing it more. But I wanted to say this last meeting, but there are too many people. But yeah, it's really good.
I think the issue with the by right, it's not that we don't explain it well, it's just it's a message but people don't want to hear. Right? That's not the answer they're looking for. So that, they don't, it's do. I mean, to some degree, it's not what they want. So you just have to beat the drum.
And then my second comment is, when it comes around to Mr. Sabinoff, I would like to hear a little bit more formally about the retirement.
You were joking, I hope.
We'll get to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Trent, Mr. Stanzika, Ms. Howe, Ms. Cruz.
No, thank you.
Mr. Evans.
No problem.
Mr. Briggs.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Collab.
I think the only thing I want to just add on to the last comment that Ms. Howe was making was that when we're up here, Brent and I are up here trying to explain a by right development versus a special approval, let's just call it for that. Our attempt is to educate both the planning commission and the public, and it's a balance test because we don't want to take this as a threat. As in, you don't approve this, you're going to get stuck with this. We try to say that this is what they could do by right, and this is what they could do with special approvals, and it's better than what they could do by right.
But it is what they're going to get stuck with, right? And so sugarcoating it too much means that they then think that we have discretion.
Well, it's a balancing act. We're trying to balance out, what can be done by right versus the better plan through a special approval that we're trying to look at here.
I can tell that you're trying to be as objective as possible, because I don't think you're supposed to bias one way or the other either. But yeah, it's definitely a lot better. It's a lot easier for the first-time person to come in and understand what is being discussed. From the first time I sat in here trying to figure out what are they discussing, what is the argument, you could say, or what is the case presented before us. The PowerPoints make it much easier.
Yeah, and we're trying. I mean, thanks for noticing, everybody. But I go back to the Davis site condominium. It was a 13 or 14 unit condominium along Long Lake Road, and went to city council, and there was a number of people spoke in opposition and very heated. And then after the meeting, I came out the side door and I went to my office, and there was a pack of residents waiting. They weren't waiting for me, but they were standing at the door to my office, and I wanted to go home. So I went by them, and they started talking to me, and I made a point to stay there until every question was answered. It took me half an hour just to get to my office, but it was time well spent, because the conversation started very negatively and kind of accusatory, and after 30 minutes, when I had a chance to explain and listen and engage and spend time with constructive dialogue, they understood. They finally got it. I said, listen, bottom line, if it was me living there, I'd rather have a cluster than a traditional. Here's why. And we just spent time talking. And after that, we were positive, constructive, and joking, and it was all good. But it took a planning commission public hearing, a city council public hearing, the developer reaching out, and still at the council meeting it was negative, and it takes repeated effort because change is bad, right? I mean, no one likes change in their backyard, and you can talk about the theory of why it makes sense, but when it's in your backyard, that's reality, right? So we'll keep doing what we do. We'll keep making an effort to educate and to make this process easier on everybody. So June 15th. June 15th, Kathy Zarnecki retires. It's her last day. So we'll I've talked to her about it, and she's she's amenable to a going away kind of a cake and coffee, so everyone will get an invitation. I'm going to invite the development community as well, because she's going to be missed.
How many years does she work here?
She's worked in the planning department for 15 years, and the city hall, I want to say, for about 20. She's a really good person and really good at what she does.
And she's a planning commissioner in her own community.
Soon, I believe soon to be chair.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for her.
Yeah.
How does she sit here and not say a word?
She's really good at her job.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's great.
I did not know that.
Well, the obvious question.
Did you chafe her?
I hope not.
Every day.
So is she gonna have time to train someone new?
So,
Because I
yeah,
know
so.
the city process is labor intensive.
That's very well put. It's labor intensive. So we've got some good candidates. We're going to schedule interviews very shortly. So if there's not enough time for Kathy to train the person before her last day, she's willing to come back as a part-timer to help. She's also, you may see her take minutes here for the Planning Commission for a while. And she may take minutes for other boards and committees. She's a very valued employee as a full-timer. She'll be a valued employee as a part-timer, as a consultant, basically. She brings a lot to the table, and there's a place for her here in any capacity that we can fit her for as long as she wants. She'd be
amenable to that type of arrangement then?
We've already got a contract for a consultant contract put together, and so you won't be seeing the last of her. When you have a good full-time employee and they're willing to come back as a part-time employee at less money,
yes.
Guess what? They come back. So
You're a lucky man.
yeah, she's excellent. It's been a tough couple months. Gary Bowers retired, and then Kathy. We're a small department, so it's
Was the
hard.
job posted?
Pardon me?
Was it posted?
It was posted, yes. It was posted, yeah. So we've already vetted a number of resumes, and we're going to be scheduling interviews shortly. So we got some really good candidates. We'll have a very, very strong, very, very capable person replacing her. So we move forward, but she's got big shoes to fill. Or what's that?
Or he has big.
Well, Kathy has big shoes to fill.
The
No.
replacement has big shoes to fill.
The replacement has the
Okay.
big shoes.
All right.
Extra bedtime.
I got my metaphor all screwed up.
It might be the opposite way in Canada.
You all misunderstood. I was right. You were wrong. No, thank you for. No, it's you got my drift. She's excellent. She's excellent.
I was impressed.
So.
I will agree. Well, we'll miss her.
It sure will.
That's all right. She's coming back. She's taking minutes.
Especially when we go to conferences and all, because she takes care of all that.
I know.
It's gonna be a reality check for this guy right here.
Yeah.
Oof, yeah.
So one last thought I have is just between the two projects that we discussed tonight, we have 600 apartment units that are lined up to come in Troy, plus an additional probably close to 100 off of John R. and Big Beaver, west of John R. So we're at about 700 units, right?
888 Big Beaver.
Big Beaver.
That's
A couple more
270.
200. So we're up to 1,000, almost 1,000 units already lined up for Troy that have been approved. So that, that should tell us at least a couple things. The economy is strong and Troy's a great place to come and live. I mean, there is that diversity of the actual customer, the actual resident that wants to come to Troy even in one of these units.
And even more importantly, the developer is willing to risk their capital for that purpose.
Right.
Well, last I checked, we were still fertilizing out here and cutting the grass on the Civic Center property.
Right, so that's my final thought. No other thoughts, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
All right, one.